Okay, hey everyone, Jamie Starr here. Today, let me just switch to the normal one since it's just me solo today. Today, let me first off just get the disclaimers out of the way, and I will open up the restream chat in case anyone feels like chiming in. So today, I am going to be doing some research for the documentary I'm working on concerning Black Lives Matter, their ideology, who it comes from, who's funding them, who's influencing them, and all of that good stuff. So that's what we will be getting into today, because one of the things that keeps sort of popping up in my head is we keep hearing this assertion that America is racist, it's a white supremacist country, and all of this stuff. And I mean, some of it is just like, some of it I've realized you have to just sort of take a look through the lens of just Black America, and have these blinders on that just push everything else out. Like, you have to be unaware of the enslavement of the Irish and the treatment of them, and what was going on globally, these sort of trade between the Arabs and the Africans and all this other stuff. And I mean, so in order to take this perspective that's just very warped, that like the Constitution is the founding document of race, basically the 1619 position, which the author has even come out and said it's not historical, it is a work of fiction. It's basically a Disney story of America's founding and all of this stuff. I'm getting errors about frame rate dropping and stuff, so if there's any issues, this video, I am recording it as well. I will just upload a clean upload to YouTube. So I've been asking myself, with all this going on, like, if the Nazis had Mein Kampf and they had Hitler just yelling out these positions, like, okay, so we know what this guy was thinking. It was just on the fucking table, right? And the communists, we know their goal because you got the Communist Manifesto, right? There's a book for it. Like, we know what the Muslims are thinking. There is the Quran, and there's a reading of the Quran that can be an interpretation that's really, warped and fucked up. So the question I started to ask myself is, what is the pinnacle white supremacy America text? What is the manual? What is the book that would be, this is it, this is the game plan, this is the blueprint, this is the end goal? If so, who wrote it? Now, there's a whole mess we can get into here with, Planned Parenthood and all those people, and which side of the aisle was saying what, and and I think that's why a good handful of it is, people on the left saying, oh, well, don't look at what LBJ was saying. Don't look at Margaret Sanger. Don't look at Robert Byrd. Don't look at anyone that's on the left side of the aisle. But here, if you read, Republican, pro-America text, but with this decoder, see, we've got the dog whistle list. And, when they say this, they really mean that. And when they say that, they really mean this. And I mean, that's mind control. Period. That's mind control. When someone is trying to tell you a way to reinterpret a document into something else, I mean, that is essentially what goes on with radical Islam, where there is a peaceful interpretation of the document, and then there is a warped, harmful interpretation of the document. But the problem is really with the person coming to you saying the radical reading is the correct reading, when we have documents from the people who wrote the documents in question that's not what they were thinking. That's not their intentions. So today we're going to search for white supremacy in America. Who's putting out this message? Where is this message? Can we find this message? People have said it's a hoax. Other people say it's the realest thing happening and it's undeniable. So if it's undeniable and it's the elephant in the room, we should be able to find it. If it's a hoax, we should have difficulty, and it might be all this twisted interpretation stuff. So, and then we're going to ask at the end of it all, is what these figures, whoever we find, is what they're asking for any different than, say, Kamala Harris, who's trying to repeal racial discrimination laws out in California? She might be running as Joe Biden's vice president. So, you know, I think this is a good question, because the way law works is that if Kamala Harris repeals racial discrimination laws out in California, well, that's a two-way street. So you could end up with white supremacy. I mean, the Kamala Harris could basically be doing the bidding of white supremacists. So I figure it's worth looking into. And then on a brief channel note, because I have a video in the can that I did about a lot of this election propaganda stuff going on, so I'm just going to speak generally about it real quick for a second before we really get going here. So let me say that from here on out, this channel will not feature or platform gossip, personal drama, or mudslinging of any sort. There is a really strong push right now for basically in 2016, what you had going on was you had this guy Evan McMullin pop up, who's a CIA asset, who tried to steal the evangelist base from Trump on this whole, well, you know, Trump had divorces and Trump's not a perfect person, and, you know, Roger Stone has a threesome and this and that. So I'm just going to make this statement, and this is a from here on out, this channel will not delve into people's sex lives, whether they are swingers, whether I mean, even if they're fucking kids, that's a crime. I'm against that. I think it should be shut down. The FBI should do that, but it's not my place to talk on it because I don't have proof. I haven't seen anything. Not going there. People's drug habits, not going there. That's not news. That's gossip. It's not worth my time, not worth my energy. It's unproductive. And here's the real kicker of it all. People get so worried that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were running some sort of blackmail honeypot operation, and then the same people are up to their necks in blackmail material of, oh, well, Steve Bannon had a meth problem and all of this other stuff. And it's like, well, why are you worried about Maxwell and Epstein? Because you're doing their job for them. You're the one spreading around dirt and gossip about this person and trying to hurt their reputation and their activities politically with stuff that's going on in their private personal life. So there is no need for a Jeffrey Epstein or a Ghislaine Maxwell when the general public is busy making everyone's personal lives political. This is the underlying idea behind cancel culture and everything, that your fucking Goya Bean choices is a political statement. And I'm not with any of it. So that's that. This channel going forward, not delving into people's personal lives. Political matters, matters of ideas, philosophy, ideology, that I'm cool with. Entertainment, commentary, that I'm cool with. People's personal lives will not be discussed going forward. So that's that. So let's get into the fun stuff today. So, white supremacy. We're just going to start right here on Wikipedia. White supremacy is the racist belief that white people are superior to people of other races and therefore should be dominant over them. Now, I can already say here, one of the tricks that people pull is is basically essentially operating off the assumption that white majority equals white supremacy. Like, I mean, could you imagine going to Japan and saying this is a Japanese supremacy? You'd seem like a crazy person because it's Japan. Obviously, the Japanese would be dominating this area and that area and other areas and everything like that. Now, the problem in America with this is black people have essentially stagnated and stayed a minority in this country. Their population has not grown beyond 13%, no matter what goes on. And we all basically know why that is. And if you don't know why that is, look into Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, the Negro Project. I mean, again, that is actual white supremacy, but I doubt that's going to get talked about when we're looking into these things. White supremacy has roots in now discredited doctrine of scientific racism and often relies on pseudo-scientific arguments, most similar to the neo-Nazi movement. Yeah, I wish it gave you... I have to say, I am sort of curious on what their I mean, I wish it delved into more, because pseudoscientific arguments, you know, some people say IQ is one of the bases. Other people may say it's measuring skull size. One has some merit, the other does not, but IQ also isn't everything. Term was also used to describe a political ideology that perpetuates and maintains social, political, historical, institutional, dominated by white people, Atlantic slave trade, Jim Crow laws, instead of white Australia, apartheid, yeah. In academic uses, particularly in usage which draws on critical race theory or intersectionality, the term white supremacy can also refer to a political or socioeconomic system in which white people enjoy a structural advantage, privilege over other groups on both a collective and individual level. See, now, and here's that's our main problem in society right there. The academic usage of, and this is what I was jumping the gun here. When I said the whole little bit right there about Japan, and that you would seem like a crazy person if you went to Japan and you were like, well, you know, Japan is a Japanese supremacy because the Japanese are in all the top positions of everything and they're the top money makers and all this other stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, it's Japan. Why wouldn't you expect the Japanese to be in those positions? So here it basically implies that in the academic areas with critical race theory and intersectionality, they're basically working backwards, where they're in a white majority country and they're looking and saying, oh, well, politically and socioeconomically, white people are in all of these top positions, therefore we must be in a white supremacy because they must have some sort of advantage in order to get to said position. And it's really just a matter of the numbers. Like, I'm sure if you looked, it probably carries, there are black millionaires and all this other stuff of, you know, people that are very well accomplished, whether it's Damon Johns in the fashion empire and Shark Tank and all that stuff. You have your athletes, you have your entertainers, you have, I mean, it's just wide variety. And I would kind of guess, like in the music industry, I think it would be a completely logical guess to say it's probably proportionate, where 13% of the most successful musicians are probably black, if not more, really, if not more. It's probably 50-50 in music, realistically. But one of the points I do make is that, you know, for every Rihanna or Beyonce, there's a group of, you know, 3 Swedes and a black dude, whether it's like Stargate and Neo or something, writing a Rihanna song. So again, it probably all works out proportionally. But it's this warped academic view that that, you know, it's an explain all. Racism of the gaps is a new term. So anyway, again, I'm not getting into all this now. This is the hunt for, we're looking for the white supremacy in America manual, basically. So history. White supremacy was dominant, antebellum, chattel slavery, yeah. Now, one of the other things that I think is really interesting that's going on is this sort of, again, like I said in the beginning, there seems to be two different views, and one is backed by history, and the other is sort of a retelling, warped worldview, where in actual history, like, I mean, I've seen, I would say, credible radicals talk about this. Like PBS did a good video series where they basically laid it out that slavery was a standard of the times, you know, throughout the world, worldwide, wasn't exclusive to one group or another. It was just might makes right. Slavery was imposed on the weaker people, or, you know, whoever had the technological advancements or anything like that. And then, as Christianity was really spreading, and the idea that, you know, we're all God's children, so, you know, skin color, whatever, if we're all God's children, you probably shouldn't be forcing someone out into a field and whipping them and everything like that. Then, out of that dilemma, white supremacy rose, because you basically had people who were trying to find a way to uphold the status quo. So they were then going on and being like, no, well, it's okay to enslave black people because there are differences between them. We're a higher race, they're a lower race, this and that. Now, in the fucking blinders on worldview, white supremacy was the be-all, end-all, and it was the original reason for the African-American slave trade. And it is just, I mean, this is, again, this is the viewpoint of the person who ignores global history, just looks at it from a African American perspective, ignores everything else, and then, god damn it, there's a phrase I was about to say, pathologizes in group preference. That's what I was getting at. So I mean, that's the view from that perspective, that white supremacy was the reason for it all from the jump. That's not true. There is no basis to that. And again, I've seen plenty of radicals even acknowledge white supremacy came afterwards as a justification for and a reason to uphold the status quo. Again, makes more sense in context when you know the full picture. And I'm not saying right or wrong or anything. I'm just saying there's facts, and then there's these fictions created for people's feelings. Okay, so the denial of social and political freedoms resulting in the civil rights movement, that Northern Europeans are superior subspecies of the white race. And now the interesting thing about all of this, and this is the real reality of it, that is why this whole topic really bothers me so much, is because even when you look at Margaret Sanger's writing, who, I mean, we have her quotes, she is out and out white supremacist, but even when we look at Margaret Sanger's writings, she wasn't just focused on the blacks. Like, it very seldomly, and this is again this weird sort of like, well, you know, police brutality harms thousands of people, but, you know, we're gonna ignore that. And, you know, police end up killing 2 times as many white people than black people, but we're gonna ignore that. And, you know, we're even going to ignore the black people that were armed and got killed by police. And we're going to go for the smallest percent of the smallest percent of the smallest percent and exclude as many people as possible to you know, uplift the 9 people. I mean, that's the ridiculous thing about say their names. Yeah, you can say their names. There's fucking 9 of them. Like, and good luck with trying to win over a large amount of people when you have whittled down this issue to affecting as few people as possible. rather than saying, okay, let's make this as big a tent of issue as possible so we can bring in as many people and we can actually enact reform. Like, it's almost, it's this weird, you sort of wonder if there's some sort of like need to be an underdog or something, where it's like, why wouldn't you try to make it an issue that touches and affects as many people as possible, but instead you make it as few as possible, as questionable as possible, and as divisive as possible. So again, it really seems like it's an effort to uphold the status quo, not question it. Anyway, I'm going off on tangents. So, and you know, this is a problem with some of these things here is, okay, so we have all this stuff. Opened entry to U.S. groups, Northern European and Germanic groups, and significantly altered the demographic mix in the U.S. as a result. Yeah, and there were people that were against that. Margaret Sanger hated Hispanics, Jews, Slavs, and plenty of Europeans just as much as white people. Again, the people that regenerate this stuff, it's not even as much a race thing to them as it's a bloodline thing. And the funny thing about it, you look at some of these people like Darwin, the Huxley, Wedgwood family, they were inbreeding. And that's part of the thing that sort of is so mind-blowing about all of this, is we spend so much time, whether it's in psychology, you know, sexual liberation stuff with Kinsey, Skinner, Darwin, Huxley, Wedgwood. There is, you know, I said I wasn't going to go into personal life stuff, but let me just tiptoe around it, where there's so much time spent and so much of our society structured around the ideas of morally lacking people, to say the least, like inbreeding, and just all sorts of other disgusting nonsense. And so much of our society is based around their theories and all this stuff. Okay, so anyway. For, say, sociologists, these shift marked an end of monolithic white supremacy in the United States. Or, hold on, let's see. Okay. These mid-century gains had a major impact on white Americans' political views. Segregation and white racial superiority, which had been publicly endorsed in the 1940s, became minority views within the white community by the mid-70s and continued to decline into the 1990s polls in a single-digit %. Okay. So that's all stated here in Wikipedia, and I'll be right with you if you want to say Wikipedia is questionable and all this other stuff, but if you want to question the things there, we're going to question the other stuff. So we're functioning on the narrative, as I like to say. We're dealing with the cards as they're dealt. So this says in the 90s, and I grew up in the 90s, and I can tell you, it wasn't like it was now. People got along. Race was... I mean, racism was joked at and laughed about. And, you know, it's like people would act racist as a sort of, you know, embodying the backwardsness of previous generations. You know, it's like how you would mock an old person being like, oh, hey, I don't know how you work the smartphone thingy, where's the buttons? Like, you know, that's how he would be like, hey, all there, these niggers are there, whatever. I mean, look at the Chappelle show. That's start and finish the example. Very first episode starts with a blind racist white supremacist, or a blind black racist white supremacist. So anyway, after the mid-60s, white supremacy remained important ideology to the American far right. Now, this is funny because this shows you how there is this this sort of weird shifting thing where, like, okay, let's see. The term radical was applied to groups because they sought to make fundamental changes within institutions and remove from political life persons and institutions that threaten their values or economic interests. Really? And this is why I hate Wikipedia. Where are the examples of this? I mean, I guess we could click this little 3 and see where it brings us. Lipset. Page 307. Sources of the radical right, radical volume. Right. See, it doesn't just give you a... I'm not going to be able to just pull up this book and everything like that. But it's funny because if you were to read this right here, I mean, this is like, well, what are we talking about? Getting rid of Aunt Jemima? Tearing down statues? Banning an actor from the show The Flash because he made a joke about how he would make racial jokes, but then Al Sharpton would be trying to ruin his life. Like, they're basically speaking of a right-wing cancel culture, and I just don't know when exactly that was happening. So they were called right-wing primarily because their opposition to socialism, communism, Marxism, anarchism, social democracy, progressivism, and liberalism. You know what's funny though is, did you notice how, like, okay, let's just say here, radical, 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 and social democracy, progressivism is radical because it is the bridge into all of this other stuff, and then liberalism. And social democracy is again another one of these sort of weasel words. Yeah, political, social, economic democracy with socialism that supports. Okay, so this right wing is radical because it wants to preserve America against all of this radicalism here. And that really should tell you something right there, is that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And even liberalism, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here and say that it's exactly what it says here. Unalienable human rights, foundation of America, constitutionalism. I will equate those two and give them the benefit of the doubt on that. So you have 6 flavors of overthrow, radicalism. I mean, here's the reality of the situation. These first 6 ideologies conflict with the liberalism that's tacked on at the end there. And you see, they have to frame it in this sort of manner in order for you to think that far right is... I mean, and this is really the basis. You know, I said I'm going to try to find the manual of white supremacy. And I think what we're basically going to find here is we are going to find a sort of shifting of words, shifting of meaning, and everything like that. Because I mean, liberalism doesn't align with any of those other 6 that I have highlighted. Now, it gets used as a launch pad, so to speak, because, you know, well, from liberalism, everyone should be treated equally, and then it's, you know, into, like, that shift between equality and equity, where it's, you know, well, everyone should be treated equally. Well, but if the end results aren't equal, then maybe everyone wasn't treated equally. So radical right wing is just labeled radical because it's fighting against 6 flavors of radical left wing, and then they tack liberalism on there because that's the only one that even has some that isn't radical in and of itself. Like socialism compared to, I mean, when Obama was in office, if you criticized him and called him a socialist, they would say you're a racist. Because the idea of socialism in America was just untenable. There would never be a socialist president or any of this other stuff. I mean, then pops out Bernie Sanders, so obviously that was all a lie and a farce. But it was only a few years ago where if you called someone socialist, they acted as if it was so unrealistic that you had to be nuts, but you're a radical if you're against it, because socialism, communism, Marxism, anarchism, social democratism, or whatever, and progressivism are all, those are just supposed to be fine, and if you object to it, you're the radical. So that's the framing that's going on here. And like I said, none of those are aligned with liberalism either. So don't think that these are all on one side and something's on the other. Liberalism, if anything, is in the middle when it comes to America. Let's just jump down to alt-right here and see what's... Alt-right emerged in the 2016 election in support of the Donald Trump campaign. Not true. It was on the internet way before all of that. It draws from paleo-conservative liberalism, white nationalism. All right, maybe white nationalism is what we need to bring up here. Okay, so back to white supremacy, because we're trying to find the message here. Okay, mid-60s, white supremacy remained important ideology, according to Kathleen Blue, historian of race and racism in America. White militancy shifted after the Vietnam War, racial order to more radical position described as white power, or white nationalism. Committed to overthrowing the United States government and establishing a white homeland. So, how'd that go for them in the 60s? Well, we already know, because we basically, and now here's the funny thing again, let's just keep in mind, like, we have attention spans here. White supremacy went from publicly endorsed in the 1940s to, by the 1970s, declining into the 90s into single digits. So this is saying here in the 1960s, it went into the whole white power, white nationalism thing. So if in the 40s this is being publicly talked about, and by the 90s it's down here, by the time the whole white power, white nationalism stuff came, those were the death throes, basically, of this ideology. That was it, like, lashing out and trying, which obviously didn't work. So, right-wing. See, now here's the other thing. 3 major strands of violent right-wing movements in the United States with white supremacist groups such as the KKK, neo-Nazis, and racist skinheads, which I don't think racist skinheads is an organization. I think it's more of a I don't even know what you would call it. Like it's I mean, some people in the punk scene would sort of model themselves after that look. Like it's more of a fashion trend than again, what's their reading, what's their literature, I mean, it kind of, I always consider them in with the neo-Nazis, but Nazis are socialist and the KKK is Democrat through and through. Robert Byrd, remember, Joe Biden eulogized this man. Obama was at his funeral. He was a Klan recruiter. Bill Clinton was asked about it, and he said you had to be part of the Klan to get elected Democrat. At no point are Republicans part of the Klan. Historically not true whatsoever. So this is again the problem with Wikipedia, but we're just again playing the hand we're dealt here. And a religious fundamentalist movement such as Christian identity being the 2 others. Now, I'm real curious where this is coming from, because Christianity was part of what ended slavery. Challengers from the sidelines, understanding America's violent far right. Okay, so again, we're not going to get anything from the citations, and what I assume is happening here is what Dinesh D'Souza calls this sort of ricocheting false information thing, where some crackpot academic puts out a theory, it gets picked up by the news and media, who then cites it for something else, and then it's just this ricocheting falsehood, like the big switch or any of that stuff. So again, I don't know. But again, like I also said, you know, the Quran is a great example where you can read it one way and find some great things for your life and be happy with it, or you can read it other things and want to suicide bomb some shit. So on the far right, the cornerstone of white identity is a belief in a ineluctable, unalterable, radicalized difference between whites and non-whites. Funny, because there's lots of non-white groups in America that think that racial identity is the cornerstone of... I mean, did Beyonce not just put out Black is King or whatever? See, that's my problem. That's what I'm looking for. I am looking for the white person putting out white is everything, white is king, white boy magic, white girl magic, white lives matter, white. That's what I'm looking for. We are trying to unearth it. We are trying to find it, because if we find it, you know, then we can take issue with it. Then we can say this needs to go away, this and that. But I'm lost. All I find are white people saying it's out there. Your Robin DiAngelos and your academics saying, well, it's systemic, it's hidden, it's this and that, and it's, you know, all this mind control shit. And it's like let me show you something that I found really funny. And I hate so much that this stuff is behind a paywall, because there's just so much here that I would love to share with everyone. But atheism is unstoppable, which was one of the greatest things ever going on YouTube in a time like this. I mean, this just shows you how predictable some of this is. So he put this out in 2019, this graphic here. Let's see if I can make it bigger for you guys. He puts out this graphic right here that in 2019, that basically says 2019, society is saying fuck white supremacy, and really the glacier underneath it all is fuck white people. And so now in 2020 you have Camus Bell, which... You ever notice there's a overlap between failed comedians and racial activists? Don't know why, just seems to be the way it goes. But you have them now basically using his analogy, where at the top there are these things of, you know, genocide, hate crimes, lynching, KKK, neo-Nazi. Okay, so up top here is everything that we all think is bad. And then underneath we have, and I'll tell you what's really funny about it. Like, I can't make out fear of halal meat. I mean, really, that's so so I mean, it's like, okay, well, up at the top, and this is the weird sort of ass backwardsness of it all. Like, up at the top, things we all disagree with, but the message they're sending is that's just the tip of the iceberg, because the bigger problem lies underneath, like fear of halal meat. First off, why the fuck do you care what meat I'm eating or not? Fuck you. That's the reality of that. Second off, swastikas, racial slurs, N-words. I mean, this is, let me put it like this. I once had a person call me at my mental health job, and she was basically complaining that a health worker called her a name, called her cuckoo. And I was doing my job. I was trying to be sympathetic. Oh, you know, someone's there to help you and they're being mean to you. That's not cool. You know, you're already in a vulnerable position. They shouldn't be taking advantage of you, this and that. The woman ended up revealing that she made the person cry afterwards, so I felt like a chump for even offering her sympathy. But at one point in this conversation, she asked me, she said, how can I make sure this never happens again? And I told her, as I would tell any logical person, well, you need to choose how much power you're going to allow other people's words to have over you. That's not the answer she wanted to hear. She didn't want to hear that it's her fault that she's offended by this. But that's the reality of it. The N-word could stop being a thing tomorrow if people just said, oh, I'm a nigger, what of it? You calling me a name isn't going to affect my bank account, random bitch on the street. Like, oh, you think I'm a racial slur of... And? I mean, this is, again, the growing up in the 90s thing. I had black friends where I'd call them white boy, they'd call me nigga, and it was us just sort of mocking the whole thing and being like, yeah, we're both the same, what the fuck does it matter? Make America great again. Oh, that's what's hiding underneath the iceberg. Oh, yeah, that we want blacks to have jobs again. Oh my god, so awful. I mean, that's the greatest. That is the greatest of this problem right here, because what you have had is you have had two groups come out and say what Make America Great Again means. You have the people that wear the hats, and they say Make America Great Again is about bringing manufacturing back to America. It's about making it so that people who want to get up in the morning, put in a hard day's work, go home, feed their families, and be able to live and survive. We want it to somehow end up back like when there were Ford factories, and the idea that you could work for a business and you could afford everything that business was selling. That's what we want. We want it back to when black families had mothers and fathers in the home. We want it back to the 1950s of manufacturing and all of that. Colorblind society. We want the goals of the civil rights movement, colorblind society, which, speaking of which, unwoke.hr, the HR site that all these people are freaking out and saying, oh, it's for white people, it's white men lashing out. There is no race spot on those applications. It is a site doing what everyone has said they wanted. They want applications without race or gender, being stated. And yet when someone actually goes and does it, they're called the racist. So, can't win with these people. But anyway. So all the people that rep MAGA will tell you this is what it stands for. Opportunity, being able to take care of yourself and provide for yourself. And then you have the other people that are saying it's about repealing civil rights and bringing back slavery and all this other stuff. So you basically, you have the people that are against it for God knows what reason. God knows what reason, because the people that are for it and working towards it and doing things under that banner are telling you one thing, and they seem to be working towards that one thing. Again, black unemployment under Trump and all that stuff. But then you have this other side that's like, no, it's actually about bringing back segregation. Like Kamala Harris would be one of these crazy people who would say, Make America Great Again is about racism. And then in California, she's trying to repeal segregation laws. Mind-blowing. I mean, it really makes you realize that the only thing these people on the left care about is power. I mean, mind you, Obama was at John Lewis, whoever this schmuck is that just passed away. And you know what? I am really sick of this whole, if someone was alive during the 60s, they are now a saint in the, halls of the anti-racist church of the American left. Like, I'm sick of it. I don't know who this guy did or what he did or anything, but you can't be coming around saying, oh, well, the civil rights hero, and then having your party trying to undo the civil rights that you fucking fought against in the first place. Sorry. Democrats voted against it, then they tried to take credit for it. Now they're trying to repeal it. So fuck all of that. Anyway, Obama is talking about voting practices and election ballot discrimination bullshit at this guy's funeral, and no one even bats an eye at it, because there is it all does boil down to power on some level, and the right wing wants you to have power in your personal life, and the left just wants power for themselves, institutionally, structurally. That's why for everything they say, it's structural, it's institutional, it's this and that, because that's where they want to go and take over the power, because then you can infiltrate everyone's personal lives. I mean, we see it with these HR departments. Activists trained in academia then go into HR departments, and they structurally and institutionally change around a business where you can have a men's razor company shaming men over toxic masculinity. Good job selling men's razors after your feminist intersectional training has been unleashed on the marketing department. So anyway, just wanted to bring this up. Great video. Now more than ever, subscribe to censored.tv. I mean, the people you got on here, you got Sov, Milo, Gavin, Joe Biggs, plenty of other people pop in here and there, Laura Loomer, great content. So anyway, let's find us some white supremacists. So, I mean, even some of this, it's such a mess to have to deal with. In the view of philosopher Jason Stanley, white supremacy in the United States is an example of the fascistic politics of hierarchy, in that it demands and implies a perpetual hierarchy in which whites dominate and control non-whites. So, this is what I said earlier. In a white majority country, you would expect I'll just say generally, in any country, you would expect the majority in that country to be in the highest positions in the hierarchy. So let's just rattle off some examples. I would be surprised if in Israel, if a Muslim or Muslims were their top 1% of 1% of anything. I would be surprised if there were Nigerians being the top CEO, in the top CEOs and political leaders in China. I would be surprised if Russians were, running all the businesses in Australia. I mean, and again, I'm talking almost nationalities here, but realistically, that's almost as if how they break these down. And it's such the problem where, because of the multiracial aspect of America and all of that, you have this sort of infighting dynamic based on the collectivist mentality, which really shows you how deep-rooted the collectivism is. Because I don't identify with anyone but my friends and family, and I know the majority of white people are like that. The majority of black people, unfortunately, are not, and I really think a large amount of this is projection, because if you just look, like I said, the whole premise of me getting into this is Beyonce can do a movie called Black is King. Black power is completely PC, politically correct statement to make. White power is not. White people are continually shamed and put down and told the worst thing they could do in America is to act in a collective manner based on their race. I mean, in America, the worst crime you could commit is the thought crime of racial animosity. I mean, you can murder someone, but if you murder someone and it's a hate crime, well, that's worse than just murder. So in America, legally, thought crimes are the worst crimes you can commit because they add on to the crimes that really should be the worst crimes: murder, harm, assault, and everything like that. So let's see. So some academics argue that outcomes of the 2016 presidential election reflect ongoing challenges with white supremacy. So again, it's just, this is the sort of racism of the gaps institution where, you know, some academics argue the outcomes of the 2016 presidential reflects the ongoing challenges with white supremacy. So explain to me how it continued to decline in the 1990s in the polls to single-digit percents, and this marked the end of monolithic white supremacy in the United States. So it's over. In the 90s it ended. And then somehow the 2016 presidential election with a white guy who got more black and Hispanic voters than any Republican ever is the challenge and shift of white supremacy. You know, and here's the one thing that most people in the sort of racism is bad, you know, racism bad, racism, anti-racism, whatever, you know, these people that are fucking beating a dead horse, I mean, at this point they're just fucking kicking the skeleton of it, like the meat's already fallen off. But the thing they don't want to talk about is the anti-racism hustle. Like, you know, Robin DiAngelo and her best-selling book and her fucking browbeating PR, you know, hustle going around to businesses telling them how they need to diversify. Al Sharpton's non-tax-paying ass making millions. Jesse Jackson, Black Lives Matter getting hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, it's basically like these people have the same hustle going as the police, where the police need crime in order to keep their revenue going. Well, BLM and Reverend Al Sharpton and all of these other people, they need a racism there in order to keep their money hustle going, which is why in that graphic we just saw, oh, well, you know, not knowing what halal meat is racism, therefore Al Sharpton needs to keep getting a check. Like, really, really out there stuff. All right, so FBA said around 100 domestic terrorism arrests since October 1st. The majority of them were connected in some way with white supremacy. Aggressively pursuing domestic terrorism, both counter. See, this is what I don't get though. So the FBI has been arresting all of these white supremacists, but is focused on violence, not an ideological basis, similar to international terrorism and all that stuff. White supremacy was significant and pervasive. Okay, so, you know, there's... And again, it said how many arrests? Connected in some way. Over 100 domestic terrorism arrests. Okay, 100. So, how many people are in the country? 318 million. I mean, this is... I want to talk about a hoax. So, there's two ways of looking at this. There is the FBI, and, you know, all these other people were right, and that it declined in the 90s to virtually nothing. And even nowadays, we are having the FBI, you know, saying that the majority of terrorism and all this stuff is connected to white supremacy. But that majority is still only 100 some odd arrests. So, next to nobody in a country of 318 million. But you then also have these people say, oh, well, this is the big shift, and they're coming out, and all of this other stuff, and it's, I mean, it's basically a boogeyman. Where, I mean, I would honestly just, in someone who doesn't take this shit seriously, I would have expected 1,000 arrests. I would have expected there to be 10 times more than there is. Just in population numbers. Country of 318 million. God, I mean, honestly, I would expect there to be a million white supremacists in this country, but obviously not the case. But anyway, I'm not looking for the data. I am looking for the doctrine of. So white supremacy has been depicted in music videos. What music videos? Oh, probably yeah, like a Beyonce video. But again, I feel like this is all one way. Like I really want to see the music video being like, you know, some country singer being like, galloping on my horse with my white linen hood, gonna burn some crosses in the lawns of these niggers. Like, what? No, doesn't exist. Feature films, documentaries, Birth of a Nation. Oh my god, the one. Can I get a second? Can I get a second? See, that's what I hate about this shit. Is that, I mean, you can log into any streaming service right now from the death of George Floyd onward. You can log into any streaming service, and maybe this is part of what Black Lives Matter's funding is going to, and I can stream for free any sort of pro-black, anti-racist, anything. I mean, I am not your Negro is something I just keep seeing being pushed in my face, and all this other stuff and everything else. And you know, it's like, open up the window browser and it's Beyonce, Black is King, and all this other stuff. And cool, you want to have your message. I don't give a shit, so go for it. I can tell you what though, I went from a huge Beyonce fan with I Am Sasha Fierce to then, after everything after that. Because I don't want my music being political. Because you start to realize as you get older with like Rage Against the Machine. I mean, the machine is what was putting them out. Like, so you're hypocrites and opportunists. And all you end up doing is just destabilizing the country that's made you rich. So, of course, Birth of a Nation, that's a given. That is the one. But it's the only one really listed. So let's see. David Duke, former... Now, you notice how it says former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. You know what else it should mention? Do you think about David Duke that they fail to point out is when he was a former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, he was also a former Democrat. So that's the one person with a big switch, is when they left the Klan, they became a Republican. But whatever. Okay, so people online, oh my god, people are, there certainly were hate groups before the internet and social media. It just becomes easier to organize and spread the word for people and this and that. You know, it's an interesting thing. DL Hughley Doja Cat. There's this interesting little bit here. DL Hughley is another one of these people who went from being a failed comedian to basically an angry black racist. That's the easiest way to put it. And when he's combated with, I mean, this interview is so fucking funny because Doja Cat makes these statements, and it shows you how PC is so restrictive, where she made these statements because she's biracial, and she basically, I'm not going to put words in her mouth, we're going to watch the clip, but she basically puts forth this premise of, well, all I keep hearing is that being black sucks, so if you can choose to be white, why wouldn't you? Yeah, right? I mean, if you can choose to be oppressed or not oppressed, why wouldn't you choose to not be oppressed? So listen to what this moron's comments about it, and they both think he's saying something insightful, but really he's just nonsense. So
recently, the whole Doja Cat thing came about. I interviewed Doja Cat about a year ago. After our interview, she DM'd me and said that she wanted to scrap the whole interview. And when I didn't say yes, she blocked me. So that was the end of my my relationship with Doja Cat. And in the interview, she touched on her having a South African father.
Sure.
She is biracial. So your family is South African?
My dad is from South Africa, Durban, South Africa.
Okay. Saying the N-word, laughing at racist jokes, and so forth. And then they brought back this old song that she had posted 5 years ago on her SoundCloud called Didn't Do Nothing, which is a racist term that originally was started on a 4chan message board when people were making fun of Michael Brown's murder.
Sure.
Now, interesting side note here. Isn't it funny how rap music can up and down be like nigga, 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 and then Doja Cat can use a racial term, and the context of the song is not really a political commentary whatsoever, but she can use a term, not even a racial slur, didn't do nothing, and it's, oh my God, how dare she utter that.
And it's actually interesting because I remember I'm like, I've heard this term before. Where did I hear this term before? And a year ago, I interviewed Talib Kweli.
Right.
And after the interview, David Duke started tweeting about the interview.
Right.
And he was like, oh, DJ Vlad interviews Didn't Do Nothing, Talib Kweli.
Right.
This is a term used by racists and white
Sure.
supremacists.
Sure.
And she made a song called
Sure.
Didn't Do Nothing.
And my point exactly, you could swap out every time they said didn't do nothing and insert the N-word saying this is a term used by racists and all this other stuff. I mean, it shows you the absurdity of political correctness, where you could swap out the term, oh, well, the N-word is used by, you know, racists and whoever else, but Jay-Z did a song called Nigga What, Nigga Who, and, oh, but we changed the N to an ER or ER to an A or what, whatever. But
she also spoke
here's the
very badly
interesting
about
part.
black hair. Did you hear about that one?
Yes.
And the list kind of goes on and on.
It is inconvenient at best to be someone that people make their mind up about before you utter a sound. That they already know who you are and what you represent, and it takes.
Now, the irony here is that these guys are having an issue coming to grips with the fact that they had made their mind up about Doja Cat before she even made a sound. She made a sound, and then it is inconvenient that the sounds she's making are conflicting with their mind already being made up about the opinions she should have, about the way she should feel about her hair, and the thoughts that she should hold. So, again, it's the projection thing of everything we do, we're accusing outwardly of being done.
Humanity to acknowledge that. And I think that when people are young, artists, they want to get on, they want to be popular, they do the things that they think works. And in the end, it comes back to haunt you.
Yeah, I mean, she said, there was a tweet that resurfaced said, thinking about being black can make any sensible person depressed. Like, just think about it. When being white makes so much more sense, life would have value.
Okay, so let's just take that quote right there for a second. You have a movement called Black Lives Matter, claiming that this statement needs to be screamed from the rooftops because it doesn't, right? That is the whole explanation for this movement to be in existence. that black lives are undervalued and it needs to be screamed from the rooftops. So she's basically saying, well, yeah, that's depressing if it doesn't matter. And I mean, she is in line with the narrative, the pervasive narrative in society. And now these two are like, how dare she? How dare she, you know, say that this is depressing and all this other stuff. But now listen to DL Hughley just spout off ridiculousness.
That is crazy.
I mean, and this shows you how the role has essentially flipped, even with the hat and everything. Like, this is a racist person who is just going to try to sputter out nonsense in order to justify him taking offense to a statement that is the underpinning of all of his activism, because he also doesn't want to admit, because there is this cognitive dissonance between the black is king, black power, and all of this stuff, but then blacks are victims, we're held down, we're oppressed. I mean, the kings aren't oppressed. Like, you can't have it both ways. But when someone sort of acknowledges that in a way that they don't like, well, then they are the problem. So listen to this utter nonsense.
It is, if you had a choice, being black is like wearing tight shoes so you feel good when you take them off.
Okay.
It is, you know it, you know that they know it, you understand it, and I can't explain somebody who takes a break. I can't explain somebody. I can say this.
Okay, so we're just gonna go with what he said there. Being black is like wearing tight shoes, and it feels good when you take them off. So all Doja Cat is essentially saying is, I want to wear shoes that fit. Right? Wearing tight shoes is no fun. So if you could choose to not wear tight shoes, I don't want to wear tight shoes. Why would I want to wear tight shoes just so it feels good at the end of it? I'd rather just wear shoes that fit. But this is the absurdity and the insanity that that this stuff has devolved into, because this is DL Hughley's new hustle.
More to me to make the people I look like proud. Not all of them, but to make the people I look like at least understand where I'm coming from, or can make a reasoned argument that I'm at least invested in what I'm talking about, as opposed to doing what I could do just to make people like me. There's nothing I'm going to be able to. You know what's funny about being black? It's this. There is more evidence that Jesus looked more like me than the picture that is classically displayed.
100%.
Right.
Because of the region.
Right.
The Middle East.
It couldn't be.
Couldn't be. There were no pale people in that region.
Absolutely.
Jews. And this is again a weird sort of oversimplified revisionist history of, you know, like and it's again, it's almost comical, where if you look at the Bible and the tribes and all of this stuff, there was a lot more diversity than people think. Diversity isn't a new thing. You know, when, I mean, they unearth pyramids in China and find like blonde-haired, blue-eyed people in the pyramids. Like, what happened to white people were in the Caucasus Mountains? The Caucasus Mountains were in Iran, Aryan. It's all white people were around there. Africa is not the black monolith nation. Egyptians were light-skinned. They weren't black. So, I mean, it is a heavily debated topic of how black was Jesus. Who cares? I mean, really, this is the problem that we face in society, which is, should we should it even matter what Jesus's skin color is? And first off, I mean, there's a whole nother layer of this where it's, we need a black Spider-Man. I mean, oh my god, it drives me up a fucking wall, the hypocrisy. Because over and over, these people will recast a white person as a black person. Especially redheads seem to be victims of this. There's a whole graphic that shows the amount of blue-eyed redheads that have been recast as black people in modern media. And their whole reason for this is, we need to see ourselves, we need to identify with it, this and that. So honestly, with someone whose teachings are as important of that of Jesus Christ, why wouldn't we just say, yeah, let everyone depict him however they need to depict him to best identify with him? Because as long as they're living in line with the teachings, that's what really matters. That's really what it should be about. It really should just be about people saying, I am siding with the teachings, and I view this person how he looks like me. I'm such a minor footnote in it, because if you're living in a line with the teachings, none of it should matter. But if you get yourself all wrapped up in, oh, well, did he look like me? Did he look like you? What the fuck does that matter? I mean, because Jesus would probably be the first one to say we're all God's children, and you're trying to what? I mean, what is the end goal of this? So anyway, enough of that. But that just shows you how you can even just verbalize the same sentiments and be othered by these activist types. So back to our search. Reddit, 4chan, alt-right, blah blah blah. Okay, so diversity is a code for white genocide. Yeah, that's a bit extreme. KKK group interviewed a documentary summarized itself as white supremacist in America. Comic book superhero Captain America in an ironic co-optation has been used for dog whistle politics by the alt-right and campus recruitment in 2017. Okay, so I'm still not really seeing, okay, academic use of terms. So let's get into this. White supremacy is academic, studies of racial power. Again, this is what I said, the power game. To denote a system of structural society racism which privileges one group over the other, this and that. So I mean, that again is just explaining demographics and the consequences of demographics as being supremacy. As I stated before, if you went to Japan and expected Nigerians to be the top 1% of 1%, you're the moron, not everyone else. If a country is 85%, 60% white, and white people are the majority of everything, that's such a common sense thing. I mean, this is where the statement, you have to be educated to be that stupid, comes in. So by white supremacy, this is again the sort of shifting mind control tactic. Legal scholar Francis Lee Ansley explains the definition as follows. By white supremacy, I do not mean to allude only to the self-conscious racism of white supremacist hate groups. I refer instead to a political, economic, and cultural system in which whites overwhelmingly control power and material resources, conscious and unconscious ideas, and this is another thing I have a big problem with, unconscious. This shows you that they are in the business of mind control. When you are talking about being concerned about the unconscious minds of people, you are in the business of mind control. And that should be rejected by everyone. Unconscious beliefs of white superiority or entitlement are widespread, and relations of white dominance and non-white subordination are daily reenactment across a broad array of institutions and social settings. So again, in this context, what they're saying is, this is again the Marxist worldview of everything has to do with power. So in the first step is everything has to do with power. And then beyond that, we're not talking about individual power, we're talking about collectivized power. So then these people are they want to be in power first off, so they want all their power, and then they're going to divide you up into groups. So here are the gays, and then in the gays we have the black gays, the white gays, the Spanish gays, the Chinese gays, we have the transgenders, we have this one and that one and that one, and each of them has a bunch of power based on how many there are and where they are and what they're doing and this and that. But it's not a you based on you and your actions. It's you in this group that they've put you in. And then they're going to pit, well, this group is doing this, and that group's doing that, and this one, so this one has more power over the next, and it's all boils down to power. And then what they say is, you know, and it's again this warped worldview. Like, let's look at the men and women example, for example. Well, we need more women in STEM and this and that. You never hear we need more women in trash collection, in plumbing, in trucking, in any sort of dirty, high-paying job. No, we never need more women in them because those are the jobs that the people in power look down upon. You know, we look at situations like women choose to go into teaching and care jobs and jobs that involve people. Men go into jobs that involves things. There's other theories and explanations for all of this, but if all you're concerned with is this power view of things, well, then the men are oppressing the women because the women don't do everything the men would do. I mean, it's really a dark worldview. And again, this also works into the whole race hustle mentality, because you can just continually find issues because you've pathologized in group preference. You've basically, you know, broke everything down in a way where there's no way to ever eliminate any of this. So the people that are fighting it will always have something to fight. John, and you know what's also funny here? Let's see. Academic users of the term sometimes refer to racism because it allows a distinction to be drawn between racist feelings and white radical advantage or privilege. John McWhorter, a specialist in language and race relations, explains the gradual replacement of racism by white supremacy by the fact that poignant terms need refreshment, especially when heavily used, drawing a parallel with the replacement of chauvinist by sexist. And it's funny, though, because this guy right here speaks out against more of this stuff than speaks on behalf of it. Like, he thinks social justice is a problem in society, but this is the same thing they do with Martin Luther King, where they ignore 90% of what he says, and then they just find this one quote and disregard the context, being like, you know, riots are the voice of the voiceless. And it's like, you know, that context could have been made about black people not having a right to vote or something, and they just take it and say, well, yeah, burn down the town because you're not getting your way. So, okay, so here they get into it again. The term's recent rise in popularity among leftist activists has been characterized by some as counterproductive. John McWhorter has described the term use of white supremacy as straying from its commonly accepted meaning to encompass less extreme issues like fear of halal meat, therefore cheapening the term and politically derailing productive conversations. Political columnist Kevin Drum attributes the term's growing popularity to frequent use by Ta-Nehisi Coates, describing it as a terrible fad which fails to convey nuance. He claims that the term should be reserved for those who are trying to promote the idea that whites are inherently superior to blacks and not used to characterize less blatantly racist beliefs or actions. The use of the academic definition of white supremacy is criticized by Connor Breitersdorf for the confusion it creates for the general public inasmuch as it differs from the more commonly dictionary definition. He argues that it's likely to alienate those it hopes to convince, or it's likely to create racial white collectivist politics where there were none. That's the problem. These people are creating the issue that has been gone by beating the dead horse. So, yet we are still not finding a book, or I mean anything besides Birth of a Nation. Nothing is mentioned here as far as this ideology. So, okay, ideology is a movement. The highest civilizations were let's see. Supporters of Nordic people to be superior by the 19th century. White supremacy was attached to emerging theories. Now, this is the other thing of, you know, the term racism is a new term. We know this historically, that the idea of pathologizing in-group preference and all this other stuff, very new. Very new. The highest civilization and culture, because here's the thing that, and this is why it's sort of very new, is because it's again sort of like slavery. There were sort of defaults. There was the British are the British, and this is the other factor of it, is these groupings are new. Because, you know, it used to be the British are the British and the Germans are the Germans, and, you know, the British would go and fight the Germans in World War II, so you can't just say, well, they're white, and that's white on white violence. So they're, I mean, you know, these people who speak against the black on black violence thing as if it's, you know, I mean, there's a reason why it gets pointed out, because it's drastically higher than any other rate, but in-group violence is a normal thing. But again, you are collectivizing them in the broadest sense, and then not realizing the deviation between the two groups. Like, you know, in a broad sense, black on black violence could exist, but if it's a black member of the Bloods and a black member of the Crips, well, that separation right there is they're not in the same group. They're actually in two opposite groups. Similar, the British and the Nazis would fight during World War II. Yes, they are both white, but they are two different groups, two different people, two different customs, all of that stuff. So you had British, you had Irish, you had Scottish, you had German, you had all of that stuff. So this white thing, white people, is a new concept. And it obviously didn't last very long, because it went from the 1940s of people being convinced that white people are different than blacks, to then 40 years later everyone just being like, well, fuck it, let's just be Americans. How about that? That's what this nation was started on. But now we're told that no, see, America was actually started just for white people, and these ideas are, you know, made by flawed people, therefore we can't encompass them, so we should adopt the ideas of genocidal nations of the past, and we should adopt Nazi principles and communist principles, because those have worked out so well in history before. I mean, pure insanity. So high civilizations and cultures apart from the ancient Hindus and Egyptians, which I mean, there is historical evidence to show that Buddha might have also possibly been white. Muslims worship redheads. So again, lots of diversity in the past that kind of blows holes in a lot of these racialized views. So are found exclusively in the white race, and even with many dark people, the ruling caste or race is fairer in color than the rest, and has therefore eventually immigrated. For example, Brahmas, the Incans, the rulers of South Seas, are all in fact necessity as a mother invention. They gradually became white and had to develop their intellectual power and invent the perfect in all arts and struggles, misery, whatever. Now, again, an easy way to sort of blow a hole in this is to look at a culture that had this within its own culture. The Japanese, for example, you know, There's the idea of the geisha, the white face painted, and all of this stuff. And that whole concept comes from the idea that it's not fairer skin in terms of race necessarily, but it's fairer skin in terms of who's inside. The indoor workers and the outdoor workers, the management and the labor. And one of the interesting things about this is I've heard Jewish people get into debates with people about the there's that story of the two brothers in the Bible, and the one is supposed to stand for the Jews and the other is supposed to be the Goyim, and they basically explain it as management and labor. We're the indoor managers and you're the outdoor laborers. And again, now here's the whole thing about all of this. Industrial Revolution just fucking, the idea that America has a middle class, or had a middle class, the middle class that the MAGA people want to bring back that's so oppressive, blows a hole in all of this. Because at one point in American history, there wasn't just the rich and the poor, there was a middle class. Of course, bringing back a middle class is racism, and honestly, anyone who doesn't want to bring back the middle class, you need to look at them, because chances are they want there to be haves and have-nots, and they just think they're going to end up having by what side they're picking. So, eugenicists, the passing of the great race. Yeah. See, this is all the American leftists who inspired Nazi Germany, extermination of Slavs, Jews, and gypsies and all this. So again, now these people were all white. So white supremacy, you can't, even with eugenics, you can't call eugenics a white supremacist movement, because there were plenty of whites that it wanted to get rid of. See, that's the weird sort of thing about them creating this political class of white and then claiming there's a white supremacy movement, when a lot of the groups that were like, yeah, let's get rid of the blacks and the Hispanics and all this, yeah, but they also wanted to get rid of Slavs and Jews and gypsies and people that skin color wise were white. Christian identity is another okay, so yeah, here's the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, hence the descendants of 8. So, but this is the thing, is in this Christian identity, there are plenty of people that take it in a Jewish identity sense and then believe that the Jews are the better of the brothers. And here it says, aside from this, its ideology is similar to many Christian identity groups that believes it's the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that there's a Jewish conspiracy, governments in control the banking and all this stuff, and it's published saying that all races other than white are mud races, and that's the religion teaches. So now here's a funny little bit here. The white supremacist ideology has been associated with a racist faction of the skinhead subculture, despite the fact that when the skinhead subculture first developed in the United Kingdom in the late 60s, it was heavily influenced by black fashion and music, especially Jamaican reggae, ska, and African American soul music. Now, you would really think that common sense would tell you, if you were trying to say that white supremacist ideology faction of skinhead subculture is heavily influenced by everything black, maybe it doesn't have anything to do with white supremacy. That's just my guess. I'm not real knowledgeable on skinheads and their beliefs and all that stuff. But if it's so influenced by all of this black stuff, maybe they're not as racist as you're purporting them to be. If you don't just see that and just say, okay, something's wrong here, Like, that's not a caveat. That is a negation. That's the reality of that. White supremacist recruitment activities are primarily conducted at a grassroots level on the internet, widespread access as white supremacist websites, openly little social cause. Okay, so again, what are they presenting? That is, like, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something where I can see this and be like, oh, that's their sales pitch? Oh, that's what they're aiming for? That's what that's the movement? That's what, you know, we as white people need to be going towards? 6 people there, yeah, Facebook is banning it and all this other stuff. So let's see, I don't know, white supremacy in America. Okay, so let's just look here. Now, these two guys, I don't know who they are. Was a white separatist member of domestic terrorist group The Order. Was an American white supremacy, neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic officer. Okay, I don't know anything about those two. And I mean, they're very well, probably is a whole bunch of weirdos. I mean, looks like a whole bunch of weirdos right here. Although, I'm really wondering why there's a black woman up here. But that just shows you how bad some of this stuff is. Theory of color, confrontation, and racism offering what she described as white supremacy culture. Oh, well, she's not going to be very well accepted amongst the woke community because Wilson caused controversy after she said that homosexuality among African Americans was a ploy by white males to decrease the black population. See, this is one of the things I said is that, and this is really the shame of this whole scenario, is I will say, and this is the reality of a lot of this, you know, I give people the benefit of the doubt because in order for something to be pervasive, a lie, let me correct that, a lie to be pervasive enough to permeate society, there has to be some sort of truth to it. So you have, there's two narratives, and I will first tell you the false one, and then I will tell you the reality of it. The false narrative is the mainstream narrative. The mainstream narrative that is screamed at everyone so much, while in the same breath they're saying, this isn't spoken, no one knows this, no one needs to hear this, and it's the Black Lives Matter one. It is the, you know, log into any website, do any of your shopping, businesses with Black Lives Matter things, and we need to, you know, just shove this in everyone's faces because no one knows black people are important. And, you know, all that. And, you know, black people are targeted and they're oppressed and all this stuff. And it's why every business is just looking to bow down and worship at the altar of black. It's why black is king, because, you know, no one could imagine a Beyonce and, you know, black people think they're just losers and all this other stuff. So there's that. The mainstream narrative that we're all told we're not being told. That nonsense. Now, here's the reality. Black people are targeted. And it has to do with a lot of seeing the truth, but then having it misdirected in ways where, again, it's like I said about the police brutality thing. And this is already getting long, so maybe I'll do this as a multi-part thing. And we'll get into the David Dukes and Jared Taylors and Richard Spencers, and I mean, maybe see if any of the things they've published are the you know, root of all this stuff. But because of you know what it's saying here about depopulation, I'm going to end on this point because we've already been going an hour and a half. I have a lot to say on this nonsense topic. Black people are targeted. They are because they are 13% of the population, they are the petri dish of the elite experimentation. They are the beta test of the depopulation. So when someone like Frances Cress Welling says here that homosexuality among African Americans was employed by white males to decrease the black population, yes and no. As I said before, and again on censored.tv, watch Milo's interview with Beverly Bevins. He might have put it on YouTube. I think he did. And it's so funny because I spent 2 days wishing he would. Because that woman said some really powerful things. They were talking about how Hispanic population growth in America has exceeded blacks, that blacks stagnate themselves at 13% of the population, and because of this, they will go to utterly be ignored. Now, one of the things she says is good. They should be ignored because political parties are not going to do anything for you, and it's all about what you can do for yourselves and each others. And I support that. I, as a libertarian, support that. You should try to have as little involvement with the government as possible, and that's the end of it. No one owes you anything. It's about what you can make of yourself and how you can uplift those around you. And that service to others is the ultimate goal, especially in the eyes of God. So what actually goes on is that certain things are beta tested. I mean, we can really see this, and it's again, it feeds into this sort of cognitive dissonance attitude in Black Americans where they will on one breath acknowledge they are the trendsetters. Now, here's the part, the underlying part. The trends they tend to set are not very positive ones, but it's again because it's a vampiric thing that's happening where they're being set in an environment that is set up for their failure. The problem is this game is being set up and they're walking up to the mound. Like, you know, as the woman in the Milo interview says, you know, black people in Minneapolis didn't figure out how to make crack. They didn't, you know, import poppies or coca plants or any of that. That was brought into their communities. They did choose to sell it, though. You know, illegal guns may have been brought into their communities. They pulled the trigger, though. And you have to acknowledge both sides of it. You have to acknowledge that, yes, there are institutional forces setting up this game. It's very devilish, very vampiric. There is an evil out there that is tempting you. But ultimately, it is up to you to invite it into your life or not. Now, as I said, Black America is the petri dish, the beta test for this. So, as you have seen, out of wedlock rates in Black Americans skyrocketing, it is reflecting and skyrocketing in whites. Rap music is a great example. 90% of rap music is not offering anything to anyone except degeneracy. That's all there is to it. Now, are the labels choosing to promote that because they're invested into private prisons instead of promoting music that would uplift people? I know black people that aren't very religious that only listen to Christian music because they just don't want to hear "girl shake that ass, dollar bills falling, raining from the ceiling, guns on the table, selling drugs and about it." Like, I mean, it's like they don't want a lifestyle of debauchery and violence and drug use, so they're not going to listen to the black music that promotes that stuff. But as they find, 80% of rap music sales are by white people. So beta tested and then broadened out. And I mean, and now we see rap music as a global phenomenon. That's why you have people in England and Canada. Look at Drake. Drake is a Jewish boy from Canada acting like he's a wannabe gangster from Atlanta. Like, it's ridiculous. But that is, again, how the destructive elements that certain powerful institutions have beta tested on the black community get expanded outward. So, I mean, they are targeted, but it's not isolated to them. You know, abortion is another one of those things. On the Georgia Guidestones, where it says, you know, we need depopulation, or any of these, you know, climate whatever, you know, people talking about we need to lower the population, they're not saying we need to lower the black population and maintain the white population. Now, granted, they'll probably lower the black population first and then do the white population. So it's whatever, like, it's gonna come for everyone. That's what you really need to realize. And it's why the left, I really get curious as to how this infighting came, like, and it's why I have, even though I think there's a lot she's wrong about, it's why I have a lot of respect for, I'm gonna get his name wrong, and I'm not even talking about him, but her, I think her name is Crystal Ball, which is funny enough, but Crystal from The Hill. It's why I really respect how she continually phrases what she's trying to do is to start a multiracial, multi-ethnic, working class coalition of liberals. I mean, she is very much that 60s liberal spirit of working class, the workers shouldn't be taken, like, I wouldn't call her a commie. You can tell she has sort of communist sympathies, and she sees what's in that philosophy that entices people. I'm sorry, I'm so stuffy while I'm doing this. I'm trying to, like, clear my nose while not be obnoxious and keep going, but I can't breathe through my nose while I'm doing this. She really sees that silver lining there and is trying to bring back that, because somehow things really shifted from the 99% against the 1% to then somehow thinking that there is a intersectional war going on within the 99% or something to get into the 1% instead of us versus them. And it, again, back to what I said about the police brutality issue and this, you know, there's police brutality, and then there's police killing unarmed people, and then there's police killing unarmed white people, and then the smallest of the smallest of the smallest of the issues is police killing unarmed black people at like 13 people a year. And that is the issue focused on, because it alienates all of those larger groups that could actually be encompassed to challenge the status quo, and instead it's whittled down to the super minute group and then all the others. I mean, this is one of the big issues, is that if all of our problems are structural and institutional and everything like that, and it's your academic institutions that are pushing intersectionality and critical race theory and all of this anti-white supremacy shit and all of this nonsense, and then it's the media that's doing the exact same and everything like that, and you're telling me the problems are systemic and structural and institutional, well, then the problem is intersectionality, anti-racism, and all this idea that it's not enough to just not be racist, you have to be anti-racist, and all of this other garbage, critical race theory and all that, that's coming from the structures and the institutions and everything like that. So you can't be adopting the philosophy that all of these corrupt institutions are pushing on everyone while telling me the problems are the corrupt institutions. That's my main point of contention. You can't have it both ways, and that's where you look like jackasses. That's why no one takes any of this shit seriously, because you can't say the problems are the institutions, and yet your ideas are nurtured, raised, and brought out of those institutions. That's it. That's the main issue. And until people want to recognize that you can't say you want to tear down everything that you promote, because you're just, I mean, it's circular logic. It's not going to get you anywhere. And as I said, I want to end on the remark that the black Americans are the beta testers for what will be expanded out more largely. So as we can see, I am now barely even breathing, can't even, I need to blow my nose and fucking end this. So this is obviously going to be an ongoing series because I want to find, I am inundated with anti-white supremacy. I don't even know what white supremacists actually think. I mean, I know in a vague sense what they think, but what are their goals? What do they want? Because when I hear, I mean, it was the most disturbing thing on the news the other day where I heard that Kamala Harris and this other woman that Joe Biden is considering for VP, they want to repeal anti-discrimination laws. So it's really at the point where the woke left, and you know what? Just to end this on a good note, Ryan Long, white woke or racist woke. We're gonna end on this joke because I feel like this really is the embodiment of what's going on and what
When
we're
me and
going
Brad
to,
first met, I didn't think we'd get along.
and what we're gonna find here is that those that are claiming to be the wokest are actually enacting policies that the white supremacists would want. You see, I'm fucking losing my voice. So subscribe to the channel, follow me on all the social media, Jamie Star Music, New World News Network, jamiestar.org or .net, or I mean just Google me, Jamie Star Music. It'll either be me or you know, things about how Prince once used this as a fake name. And I'm just gonna cut the video after this video, so have a good one, everyone.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. We both have a lot of opinions about people of color, even though we barely know any.
I say colored people, but as long as we're classifying them, we both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same.
And vote the same. You don't want to lose your black card. Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should
Roll back discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx, now you owe me a Coke. Hey, tell them what you told me yesterday.
White actors should only do voices for white cartoon characters.
I've been saying that for years. Stick to your own.
Us white people, we have so much privilege.
I agree. It is a privilege to be white. Ask him about interracial dating.
All I said is that black men who date white women have internalized racism, and white men that date ethnic women are fetishizing them.
Guys against interracial dating now. Like, am I being pranked? Did Boomer put you up to this?
Ugh, you know that taco place is white owned?
White people should be making white foods like Kraft macaroni and cheese, no seasoning, not even salt. It's like he's a mind reader. I mean, I've been pushing for segregation forever, and my man does what?
I created an improv comedy show exclusively for ethnic people.
Guy segregates comedy on my birthday.
White people need to stop wearing dreadlocks, and they need to stop appropriating black people's music.
Shaved heads and country music, the way God intended.
You know all white people are racist.
I'm listening.
Even if you have a black wife or a black friend group, you're still really racist.
You know, we just kicked a guy out of the organization for having a black girlfriend, but if you can promise me he's still really racist, we'll consider letting him back in. Black people should only shop at black businesses.
I guess the only thing we really disagree about is I think white people are the root of all evil.
But what did I tell you, though? If we can narrow that down to a certain group of tiny-hatted white people, I think we can come to an understanding.
Technically, I don't consider Jewish people white.
Neither do I. But we're still cool with interracial cucking, right?
Yeah, as long as you pay for it. Sex work should be celebrated.